everyone. I'm Ekaterina, and today I'm going to talk about pricing research. Not probably the most exciting topic, but I hope you will get inspired and find a thing or two that will help you make it less painful and probably cheaper as well, because everybody can actually do this. I'm going to cover why it's important. I'm going to talk about top 3 research methods and how to analyze the results of such surveys. I will cover how to apply the learnings and, in the end, how to run a pricing experiment. I've been working in marketing and growth for about 15 years by now and currently lead marketing and growth efforts at Mimo. Apart from this, I'm advising startups and mentoring, but the most important thing is I've run hundreds of experiments in my career, covering user acquisition, product growth, virality, everything, and a lot of them were obviously based on the pricing research as well. So I'm going to share some of the tips today. So first of all, why does it matter and why you should do it? If you want to grow sustainably, you probably need to a stable revenue stream. And LTV is the metric that pays a lot into it. And in the end, lifetime value as such is pretty straightforward. It's about the lifetime of a user, or like the number of billing cycles that an average user has, plus the value that they pay, which is pretty much the price that you're charging, minus taxes and store fees. Right, so pricing impacts a lot of things in your product. First of all, it affects user decisions about making the purchase to begin with. It also affects the size of your customer base because, as you can imagine, if somebody is willing to pay $20 for solving a certain problem or like removing a pain, and you're charging 10, they will be super happy about the deal that they got, and they're more likely to recommend it to friends, family, etc. So indirectly, it can impact your customer base as well. It defines your packaging and positioning because you can pack and promote the same product in different ways, even if the product serves the same purpose and helps the user get to the same goal. For example, at Mimo, we aim at helping beginners to become professional developers. And we can position a certain product as a bootcamp because we have live tutors, we have all the necessary information that the users need to get to the job in development. And in this case, we can obviously charge up to $10,000 in the US, for example, for a bootcamp, because this is acceptable for this category of products. At the same time, if we create an online learning platform, we are unlikely to be able to charge more than $30 a month for it, even though it can lead to the same outcome. And most importantly, if the product value is separated from the price, and if you never look at it together, it might also make it harder for you to prioritize what features to develop next, because you might be spending a lot of time on the features for which users are not actually willing to pay more, even if they solve a certain pain or like a problem. So in the end, we have the price, which is what we charge, and we have the user's willingness to pay. And your job is pretty much to narrow this gap between the two. This is where all the optimization efforts lie. And the most important thing here is to figure out who, how much, and what for is willing to pay. I could not share much data from my own products, like the products I'm working with, because this is because NDA. But I found this very good examples back in the days where the company called Profitwell, which was acquired by Pedal later on, did this research back in 2020 where they asked prospective Calm and Headspace users as well as existing users about how their willingness to pay would differ. And you can see that there is a lot of difference based on the motive and the main goal that they're using the app for. At the same time, it might also differ based on the frequency of usage. So users who are using the product more often or have longer sessions might also be willing to pay more for it. These are just a couple of examples of how the willingness to pay might differ. So apart from motive or frequency of usage, you can also notice that it differs by proficiency level. Some users might need more or less support with your product, by profession, etc. And now I also want to tell a story about price. Basically, when I started experimenting with it back in 2021, more or less like 2020, we were hitting the LTV ceiling at Mimo. And this would also not allow us to scale paid acquisition significantly. So we had to find a solution to not only improve the conversion to purchase, obviously all of these funnel optimizations were happening, but additionally, we really had to find breakthrough ways to increase lifetime value. It was not one of them, it was not super breakthrough, but it helped. Basically, we increased prices by 25%. And obviously, the conversion to trial and conversion to paid dropped slightly, but it was still worth it because in the end, the average revenue per user, our target metric improved by 16%. Then we tried to do the same in 2023. We also tested increasing the price by 25%. It also worked out, but already the increase in total day 30 revenue was a little bit less impressive than before. And then we tried to pull the same thing in 2024. And this is where we found out that even a 10% increase in price led to a 13% decrease in average revenue per user. So the conversions to trial dropped and the cancellation rates increased. So in the end, it was not really worth it. We did not roll it out. I don't know why this happened exactly, but there are a lot of things that impact pricing and purchase decisions as well. So as pricing impacts a lot of elements, it works the other way around as well. So your brand might matter, your customer support, even the design of your app might matter when it comes to users' willingness to pay. How sensitive users are to the price, usually there is a difference by market. Your category and how you're positioning yourself. This is the bootcamp learning platform example. How users perceive value, your competition, overall your growth strategy and how aggressive you have to be there, and market and industry trends. So again, I don't know why increasing the price stopped working, but I have some assumptions. And I believe it has a lot to do with user sensitivity to price and the recent industry trends. From the Adaptis report from 2023, you could see, it's free to download, you could see that a lot of apps have increased annual prices as well as their monthly prices. It might have to do with the fact that the economic situation was not necessarily the best in the last couple of years. So a lot of apps suddenly needed more revenue to keep growing. At the same time, what you could see is also that the monthly subscription retention rates have decreased. So the users started churning more as well. To me, this also fits into what I saw in the last couple of years, because we can keep increasing the prices, but it does not mean that users will be sticking around. There is obviously no data on the yearly churn there because we will only see it probably this year. Now, I talked about why it's important and why not always it might work out. But what you can do and what kind of inputs can you get to be a little bit more certain in your pricing decisions? Probably the most popular research method and also not very complicated one is Van Westendorp price sensitivity analysis. It's 4 questions that you ask users in a survey, and you end up with one graph that can help you determine your optimal price and like the ideal price range. It tends to look like this. I know it's not a good example of a graph because it doesn't have the values on them and the axis, but I could not share, obviously, the real one. So for this, you can get insights like what is your optimal price range and the optimal price point, where you currently stand. And also, if you do such kind of surveys regularly, you can also see how the willingness to pay changes over time. One of my colleagues went and just started Googling, and he found different spreadsheets that can help you optimize this analysis, because to be honest, for me over the years, it's become quite a pain. Then he put together a lot of things. He added some customization on top. In the end, for $10, he allowed me kindly to be able to share it with all of you. So if this is the kind of research you plan to do or want to do regularly, check out the template. It might really make it easier. Some extra tips for running this kind of research. Try to find the users who are motivated to use your product and to solve the problem, are willing to pay for it, and also have no blockers for using it. Before you start asking about the actual price that they're willing to pay, you can also ask some, I call them qualifying questions, which can further help you segment out this audience in case you want to analyze willingness to pay by segment. Remember the Calm versus Headspace examples where the difference can be quite significant. Additionally, make sure to be very clear about the prices you're asking about. Make sure to specify what subscription duration you're talking about, and also the currency in which you expect the users to answer. Second research method is price list. It's even simpler than this one, and I think this was the first research I actually ever did back in 2020. You basically ask at which price users will or will not buy your product, and then you can build a graph which shows the distribution of the answers. And the last one, which is the hardest of all of these three, to analyze and to run, at the same time might be the most reliable one, because it shows you the combination of actual features with the price, is conjoint analysis. And I'll be honest, I did not run this in my career yet myself, but I know a couple of very interesting case studies that I wanted to share. In theory, how it works is you also ask several questions. So it usually works in the form of a survey. First, you come up with different variations, so like packages of your product, which contain different features with a price label on them. And then you ask the users to sort them in order of like how likely they would be to buy them or not. And based on this, you can calculate the value of each specific feature, because different features get repeated throughout the packages. However, what I found very interesting is what Thankful did back in the days. They got acquired in 2023, so as a product, they don't exist separate anymore. What they decided to do is not to just run a survey. They wanted to do user interviews and to actually see users in real time, sorting out through 6 of these different options and voicing their thoughts behind it. And Jack, who used to run growth there, said that they got a lot of invaluable insights when they were listening to people who were making these trade-offs in real time. And what's also super interesting, or what I find very interesting, is that initially the goal behind this research for them was to not only find the features for which people were willing to pay or not, but it was also to come up with the winning combination of the elements for their paid advertising, because they wanted to scale paid advertising and they wanted to use static images. Obviously, it's not so easy to showcase all your value, all your USPs in one static image. So they really wanted to find the elements that are more likely to resonate with the potential users. And yeah, they wanted, for me, it's impressive that this is the kind of research that got applied to the marketing and acquisition strategy rather than kept sitting in the product team. What else can you do to guide your decisions better in pricing? Because we talked about the surveys, but there are obviously also some other inputs that you might already have, probably you do. One of them is the competition research. In the last edition of Retention Blog, Jacob put together this nice scraped list of prices for the top health and fitness apps, for example, and the difference by country. So this can be one of the inputs. I'm not necessarily a fan of competitor-based pricing as such on its own, but I think it's a super valuable input for you to figure out where you actually stand when it comes to value versus the price that you're offering. Obviously, if you have some solid USPs, which your competitors don't, and hopefully that's the case, it does not mean you can follow with the competitors' prices and just blindly follow the market. You can always try to charge more for it. But I still think it's a great thing to keep in mind. Another type of input you can get, which is the type of experiment you can run, is called painted door experiments. If you consider some new features for development, and these features might take 3-6 months to execute, to come to life, it might make sense to try and measure the demand for them potentially so that you don't waste this time. And this is the kind of, what you can do is to create a dedicated paywall, which is talking about the specific feature that you're considering for a test. And then you can measure the clicks on the button. And then you have two options after that. You can either charge users for the feature that does not exist yet, and then you have to give them a refund and apologize and say, sorry, it's going to be available in a couple of months, if that's the case. Or you can just measure the clicks on the button and not actually let users make a purchase. This is what we did many years ago when we were trying to figure out the demand for live lessons. If you can imagine that creating live lessons, unless you have some AI avatars these days in your product, is a lot of effort. You need to find live tutors. You need to do this across multiple markets in order for users to be able to actually, use the feature. So we did not want to put all this effort without knowing if our users would even pay for it. In the end, we did not do it, but it helps to validate some ideas faster. There are obviously a lot of drawbacks to this approach, so I'm not saying do this for every feature you're considering, because first of all, it creates a broken experience for the users, so you cannot do this too often. Also, clicks on the call to action on the button are not super reliable. It might show some interest, but some users might just click out of curiosity, so there might be much more drop-off at the checkout after anyways. And it also underestimates the impact of other factors like execution, designs of the paywall, obviously, the marketing work you might need to do to promote the feature, or timing. And also it prioritizes easily testable ideas versus something more complex and innovative. Another input, automated surveys. There are certain points in the user journey where I totally recommend placing them, like canceling the trial, canceling the subscription, and renewal, for example. Canceling the trial is obvious. You want to know what did not work out. Canceling the subscription also makes a lot of sense because a lot of users cancel the subscription within the first or 7 days or so because they don't want to be charged automatically. That's really a recurring thing in the user feedback that I keep checking. Renewals are slightly different. For renewals, you want to usually follow up with users for an interview because the best way to calibrate your positioning, USPs, etc., is to also keep getting the input about what your power users value and what they're really willing to keep paying for. So this is just a health check thing. So at this point, you should have multiple inputs like trial cancellations, support ticket, including support tickets, subscription cancellation survey. You can also go to Google Play and download the written responses of the users who cancel as well. You can check the refund requests and, like I said, renewals as well. Last but not least, if you still feel like you know the what, but are not sure about why this is happening and why your willingness to pay looks the way it does, it's time to follow up with user interviews as well and to try to figure out what they're ready and not ready to pay for. Now, when it comes to applying these learnings, I think there are 4 most important areas that you have to cross-check and cross-validate. First of all, it's how the willingness to pay that you researched plays into your value proposition and positioning. Again, remember the bootcamp online platform or coding app example. It's important to know in which category you fall in the user's mind, because all of us already have certain idea about where the product falls, and this also leads to ideas of who you are competing with at this price. Then you also can figure out what's the main difference, whether it's about personas or core users or however you define it, or ICP. You need to figure out what's the main difference between those who are willing to pay and those who really are not. And this can help you adjust your value proposition, target segments, and acquisition channels. Because once you know who is more willing to pay for your product, it becomes also easier to figure out where these people are. So you might be already having your marketing strategy working pretty good anyways, but it's just something to double check. Most importantly, make sure the features that you are developing do not end up in the lower bottom of this chart. Ideally, you want to keep creating features that can increase the willingness to pay and not end up in the trash land or just the support of the core features. Of course, the core features is the tricky segment because you might need to implement what needs to be there in order to reach parity with peers. Obviously, if all of your competitors offer certain features and your users expect them, you might not be able to grow without them first. But in the end, ideally, after the foundations are covered, you focus on the upper top of the chart. And the last one is about how your willingness to pay, like whatever insights you might get out of the research, how does it differ based on the segment or geo? You might not be able to adjust the price in your product based on the segment, like their motivation or profession, etc. But geo and pretty much, localizing the prices is a pretty acceptable practice these days. Netflix does it, Spotify does it, almost all of the apps might as well. I mean, I think a lot of them do it. So how do you do that? You analyze the split of your users by country. Then you need to find the best proxy for purchasing power in the markets. And most of the time, the apps go with GDP or Big Mac index, which is valid. But what I personally like is the advice from Dan Layfield, who used to lead growth at Codecademy. It's our competitor. That's how I know it. So what he recommended to do is to actually align use the indicator of the price as a part of the person's monthly salary, like if it's applicable for your product. Obviously, it would be applicable to us because we are trying to, we are on a mission to help beginners become professional developers. And the salary of a developer is different in Brazil compared to the US. So obviously, it's a different trade-off for them to make when it comes to paying for it. And lastly, you can, of course, always adjust the prices per market individually, but you can also group them. You can start a bit easier and pretty much define the tiers that might make sense. Like tier 1, which is typically US and Western Europe, tier 2 with other English-speaking markets and Eastern Europe, and then you have India, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia. Ideally, I also would recommend to not only test the price based on the market, but research other things like payment methods because they differ by market, and also the split between subscriptions and in-app purchases, like especially the lifetime purchase. Because in a lot of markets, users are not used to recurring payments and they would prefer to just purchase once. This is where lifetime subscriptions come in, and this can also move the needle. So in the end, lots of things you can do, lots of research you can carry out. I created the price and research bingo card for you if you wanna use it. Unfortunately, even if you have all of these inputs, you still don't know if your revenue is gonna increase after you do that. So the only way to actually figure it out is to run a pricing experiment. And the interesting thing about pricing experiments is that first, a lot of people care about it. You usually have way more stakeholders for pricing experiments rather than for probably any other paywall test or anything. And the thing is that there will be a lot of unknowable impacts that you might not be able to figure out while the experiment is running. So what I recommend is to define your target KPIs and the goals in advance, and to be very clear about what you can measure during the time frame of the experiment. Like if you're trying to increase the conversion to purchase, or if you're trying to figure out if your average revenue per paying customer increases. And if so, are you measuring day 30 or are you measuring day 335? Maybe you want to see how the lifetime of monthly users is going to change and how the LTV changes with it. So be clear about what you're trying to answer. And there will be metrics for which you might be able to reach significance during the experimentation stage. However, there might be a lot of metrics during which you will not be able to do that. Another thing is to peek at the results. It's not recommended. Usually we don't do it because you don't want to jump to conclusions too early, announce anything too positive when it's not really true. For pricing experiments, however, as they usually take a while, it's critical to make sure that the experiment is working, that users are falling into test and control groups like they should, that the data is getting accumulated, because the last thing you want to end up with is running it for 2 weeks or for a month and then figuring out something is off. So I recommend to peek and to double check the setup. And there are a lot of things you won't be able to measure, like maybe within the first couple of weeks or the first month. So you can additionally check the refund requests, how these develop, especially if you increase the price. Early subscription cancellations. Like I said, even for yearly purchases, you might still be able to see how many more users cancel on day 1 or day 7 or day 30. You should monitor how the distribution of plans change, because if you're just testing the price increase for one plan, like yearly one, obviously it might make users to go more after the monthly option, which is cheaper, for example. And over time, you will be able to monitor how the lifetime changes, and you also can already project your lifetime value-based revenue for that. Obviously, notify the stakeholders. Unfortunately, the issues here happen way too often. So depending on the what's happening, like whether you're increasing or decreasing the price, obviously the number of these events will change. And in case your marketing team is optimizing the campaigns for these events, you should notify them to make sure they're prepared for the performance of these campaigns to change. Maybe the successful case, which I had a couple of months ago, was increasing the duration of the trial on Android from 7 to 14 days. And suddenly our Google Ads campaigns, Google UC campaigns started working much better on Android. But most of the time it goes the other way around. You increase the price, the marketing team might not know that, the conversions drop, and there might be not enough events for proper optimization. And after the experiment, if you change something, if you roll out the variant, also make sure to share it with your marketing team, because they might be planning their work based on lifetime value, customer acquisition cost, payback period, all of these metrics. So it means if there is suddenly more space for the LTV increased, there might be more space for customer acquisition cost, and the other way around, if it changes by country. So there are a lot of things in the end that you can change in your products. You can change it based on the platform. Like you might have different setups for iOS and Android. You might have or not have certain features there. It can be pricing. It can be trial durations. It can be overall, what kind of premium features you have in different packages. Plan durations, you might have lifetime on Android, like we did. You might not have it necessarily on iOS if it doesn't make sense. And discount setups. And what's important is that it's all fun to figure out for every country individually, but it really adds a lot of complexity for your future work. So what it can lead to, at least what I personally experienced, is that if you're running worldwide campaigns or campaigns like advertising campaigns targeting certain groups of countries, you might not be able to communicate the price in them. It's similar for lifecycle marketing campaigns. Like what is really easy to do is to say 50% off, but there are experiments that sometimes can show you that actually mentioning the actual price works better and performs better when it comes to users purchasing. So you might not be able to do that, or if you do, you need to go with more segments to target. This adds complexity and extra work. You might need to accommodate these differences with testing paywalls, and also you might be prepared for users taking advantage of it if they find out. So to sum it up, to get your price right in the next year, research users' willingness to pay. You can use very simple methods for that, but also you can use a combination of many, and make sure to analyze the results for the segments that matter to you, like to be aware of what kind of the segment is willing to pay the most. Double check how your insights align with your positioning and unique selling points, acquisition strategy, and your product roadmap. In the end, if you see space for optimization for narrowing this gap, you can run pricing experiments and you repeat the process. Thank you very much for your time, for your attention, and I'm hanging out here the whole day, so feel free to ask questions, say hi, or write me a question on LinkedIn or something.